they're spread so thinly. Our area is just one of about 120 priority areas throughout the country that they consider for 10 acres.
So you've got this local online campaign, don't you? Give a mohua for a mohua, and also you can accept a whio, a tena, a kokako, 50, or even a hoihoa, $5 there. So people can help. Hey, very nice to have you on, Andrew, and all the very best.
Oh, thanks, Wallace. And, fingers crossed that we're hoping we get a big dump of snow, which will really knock the rats back, but we're not sure yet.
Very, very good indeed.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you. And the time now is to engage your Pavlovian reaction, Raj Chakraborty, and go and do something like some skipping, perhaps?
I'm going to run all the way home.
Your arms pumping.
Good on you both. Catherine Robinson, Raj Chakraborty, thank you for your time today. I'm Wallace Chapman. I am back tomorrow, 3:45. See you then. Lisa Owen with Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, police searching for a missing Christchurch real estate agent hone in on 2 locations. We talked to an expert who's worked on another high-profile kidnap case. Something just snapped. The words of a woman on trial for allegedly murdering her 3 young daughters. MP Kitty Allen is bowing out of Parliament altogether this election. There's a whole lot of trouble on a busy Auckland road that's disappearing in front of commuters' eyes. The guy in charge of bogging a monster sinkhole up is live. And the football Ferns versus the Philippines, they're less than half an hour from kick-off. You can watch us live on the RNZ website and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, good afternoon. I'm Anna Thomas. The woman who killed her 3 daughters sobbed in the High Court today and covered her face as her recorded police interview played. Lauren Dickerson is on trial in Christchurch for the murder of twins Maya and Carla, aged 2, and Leonie, aged 6, in September 2021. She denies the charges, arguing insanity and infanticide. Her lawyer, Karen Beaton, asked how police checked Mrs. Dickerson's mental state before she was discharged from hospital and interviewed.
A person being medically cleared, so discharged from hospital for not needing medical treatment, isn't the same as being in a proper psychological state to be able to participate fully in an interview by a police officer about killing children.
Police said hospital staff advised Lauren Dickerson had been medically cleared and they trusted this included a mental health test. Police investigating the disappearance of a Christchurch real estate agent have spent the day searching a property in Hornby. Yanfei Bao vanished last Wednesday while door knocking in nearby Wigram. Forensic police have been examining the house in Trevor Street. A 52-year-old man appeared in court yesterday charged with her kidnapping. Anusha Togati, who manages a cafe Ms Bao visits in Wigram, says it's upsetting that she still hasn't been found.
It's so bad that we still can't find her, and we all just hope that she is safe wherever she is and we can find her very soon.
Police have also been searching farmland near Lake Ellesmere south of Christchurch today, but won't say if it's connected to Ms Bao's disappearance. The Prime Minister says he acknowledges the difficult decision Kitty Allen has made by leaving Parliament at the election. Kitty Allen has confirmed she will not seek re-election in her East Coast seat. She says she has failed her electorate, party and everyone who put their trust and confidence in her. Chris Hipkins says he spoke to Kitty Allen at midday when she informed him of her decision.
I regard Kitty as an exceptionally talented person who's clearly going through hell at the moment, and I think she deserves to have some time and some space, and that's what I'm committed to giving her. We will also, however, make sure that she's supported.
Chris Hipkins is confident the candidate selection process for Kitty Allen's East Coast seat can be done relatively quickly. Auckland's mayor wants better lines of communication from council during civil defence emergencies. This afternoon, the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Committee approved a plan on how better to respond in natural disasters for public consultation. The city saw widespread damage as well as loss of life during heavy floods and Cyclone Gabrielle earlier this year. Mayor Wayne Brown, who was criticised for his communication with the public during the flooding, says he wants further scrutiny of the communication channels featured in the plan and hopes to see an improvement.
The communications was pretty terrible, and I got a fair caning, and as it came out from that report, partly that was because no one told me what was going on.
Wayne Brown says he wants clear guidance on what his role is in an emergency. A worker at a cafe close to a sinkhole that has opened up in central Auckland is fearful of it getting worse. It began sinking at College Hill yesterday and is now about 3.5 metres wide. The council says teams have identified that a stormwater pipe due for renewal in August is causing the road to subside. Cafe 28 staff member Gaurav Junjay hopes the sinkhole is as big as it will get.
These kind of things happen, so it's not big of a deal unless they completely shut off this College Hill Road and everyone will be driving around the area. So there will be not much traffic in the cafe. So that is something that I'm worried about.
Temporary work to secure the damage and protect the road is due to be completed by the end of the week. In sport, the Philippines are hoping to take a parochial Wellington crowd out of the game in this evening's Women's Football World Cup match against New Zealand. The 33,000 capacity stadium is a sellout, but Philippines coach Alan Stejicic is urging his players to remember they're not playing the crowd, just 11 opposition players on the pitch.
We want to crash the party, and it's not really their party, it's everyone's party, it's our party as well. So to be playing in front of such a big crowd and TV audience is a really special moment and one that they'll cherish for the rest of their lives. So you want to go out there and give it your best shot. So I think, as motivating as it is for New Zealand, I think it is for our team as well.
The match kicks off at 5:30. In this afternoon's match in Sydney, Colombia beat South Korea 2-0. All Blacks midfielder Anton Lienert-Brown looks set to finally get a run in the Rugby Championship this weekend against the Wallabies in Melbourne. Lienert-Brown has spent a frustrating couple of weeks on the sideline after being suspended for a dangerous tackle in the Chiefs' loss to the Crusaders in the Super Rugby final. Having to sit and watch others stake a claim for the upcoming World Cup has given him plenty to ponder.
What the All Blacks jersey demands is that every position is fought for, and credit to Geordie and Enrico, they've done an extremely good job, and Braden's been also off the bench, so it's healthy, it's good for the jersey, and that's what this environment needs.
And former IndyCar driver Simona De Silvestro will become the first woman to compete in the Bathurst 1000 in 4 years, being named to drive a Dick Johnson Racing Ford Mustang in October's race. And that's the news.
The Prime Minister defends his handling of Kiri Allen's struggles.
All of the steps that Christopher Luxon set out yesterday, I effectively had done all of the things that he is saying I should have done.
A sinkhole devours an Auckland city road.
If the rain and if the weather continues to stay, it might cause bigger issues and even make it bigger than it already is.
And the most potent Manuka honey in the world.
The highest rating ever produced out of probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of samples they've tested over the years.
Sweeten up your day. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Taumaranui and Taupo. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery from this evening, easing tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine with the odd shower about Bay of Plenty. Showers developing about Hawke's Bay and Gisborne tomorrow, possibly heavy. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa and Marlborough. Showers possibly heavy and thundery from this evening with snow to 700 metres, gradually clearing tomorrow. Nelson and Canterbury generally fine. A few showers about Canterbury, some heavy, clearing tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, also Otago and Southland. Showers heavy and possibly thundery at times with snow to 400 metres in the south, clearing tomorrow morning. However, rain returning to Fiordland tomorrow afternoon with scattered rain elsewhere late evening. And for the Chatham Islands, rain at times. RNZ National, it's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi Anna, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai, haere mai, ki Checkpoint tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Forensic investigators are combing a Christchurch property that missing real estate agent Yang Fei Bao was due to show a potential buyer. The 44-year-old has been missing for almost a week after she went out door-knocking prospective clients in a nearby suburb. A man has appeared in court charged with her kidnapping. He remains in custody and has name suppression. Police have examined 3 Christchurch properties in an area near Lake Ellesmere in search for Ms Bao, but today their focus was on a Hornby house. Rachel Graham has more.
A police tent and portaloo is set up out front of the house in Trevor Street. The home, which still has a Harcourts for sale sign up, is cordoned off with emergency tape. The homeowner said they were told on Wednesday that Yan Fei Bao would be showing the house to a prospective buyer. Today, police forensic staff could be seen at work inside the home, and a police guard is keeping watch outside. Police are also requesting sightings of a silver Mitsubishi car with a distinctive yellow sticker with a kiwi on the boot. A woman who lives in Trevor Street, who asked not to be named, says she saw the car.
When the police first arrived, it didn't register with me until I heard one of the neighbours talking about it. Then it's like clicked. It's like, yeah, I remember that car. It was sitting down Trevor Street and on a bit of an angle, but I'm sure it sat there for a couple of days.
A neighbour spoken to by RNZ, who also asked not to be named, says on Sunday police came door to door asking questions.
Just mainly if we'd seen anything out of the ordinary, security cameras, that kind of thing that they were after.
Another neighbour, Luke Southey, says the street is usually a nice, quiet community, and the situation is very concerning.
Just hope that she's found safe. Is the main thing. Is wish the best for the family and her, that everything's not as bad as what people may anticipate, and she gets home safe, especially for her child and her husband.
Yan Fei Bao's husband, Paul Gooch, said that given the investigation is at a critical stage, he did not want to compromise the police inquiry or his wife's safety, and any update needed to come from the police. Harcourts Wigram, Ms Bao's employers, also said they had been told by police to not make any statements.
Former Detective Inspector Mark Guthrie was a police officer for close to 30 years and investigated the high-profile kidnap and murder of Auckland woman Ray Portman. The body of the pregnant woman was found dumped in an offal pit on a rural property in Ardmore in 2012. Ray Portman's murderer was sentenced to 21 years jail without parole. Mark Guthrie is now a private investigator and he joins us now. Kia ora, Mark.
Good evening.
Hey, one of the things that will be on people's mind is the police have arrested someone that they think is the alleged offender, the alleged kidnapper. Wouldn't the logic follow that they'd have some clues to where Mrs Bao is?
Well, certainly that's what they will be following up. The person they've arrested, they will be tracking his movements anywhere he has been, with a view to trying to find Miss Bao.
Using what kind of data, Mark? Are we talking about cell phone pings and the like?
Look, they will be looking at everything. They will look at cell phone data, CCTV around the area. Obviously, they're searching a number of properties where they believe there's a connection. Again, looking for anything that might be there that will assist their inquiry and help them to identify where Miss Bao is.
When you see a police tent like that go up at a property and the people turn up in those white disposable overalls, what do you think? What's going on?
Well, they're certainly doing a full forensic examination of the property. They wear that protective equipment to make sure they don't introduce anything into the scene. So they will be looking to find any evidence that may connect either Miss Bao or the person they've arrested to the address.
So we can assume it is a significant site.
Well, you would treat any site that may be involved as significant until you know otherwise. So you would take those precautions when you're searching a property such as that, whether there may be evidence there or not.
So does a kidnap charge mean that there has necessarily been a ransom demand?
No, it doesn't. there's a number. Kidnapping has a number of reasons that it is kidnapping, and that is it could be that a person is held for ransom, but also it's if they intend to detain or imprison a person without their consent, then that's also kidnapping.
How do police deal with ransom demands?
Well, certainly they're dealt with very carefully on the basis that you've got to be very careful that any actions you take don't cause the offender to harm the person when there is a ransom. So they're very, very difficult situations.
Yeah, the police at this point are saying that this is not a homicide case, that there is still a missing persons case. What are the guidelines or things that lead to a reclassification of that when you determine, because she's been missing close to a week now?
Yeah, well at this stage, the actions they're taking would be no different to whether it's a missing person case or a homicide case. At this stage, they probably don't have evidence to know whether she is still alive, and there is the possibility that she may be. I guess as time goes on, the concern grows, but really it's the same action whether you're investigating it as a missing person or a homicide.
And in terms of the public, how can they help in all of this?
Well, certainly anyone who has any information or even thinks they should pass that information to police. It's one of those things. Sometimes it's something that you may not think is that suspicious, but could be involved. Is the thing that solves the case.
Appreciate your time, Mark. Thank you for joining us. That is Mark Guthrie, who is now a private investigator, former detective inspector, spent almost 30 years with the police and has himself investigated kidnap cases. It is almost 5:15. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The troubled former Minister Kitty Allen has announced she will resign at the election, apologising for letting down the public, her party and the Prime Minister. Ms Allen resigned all her ministerial portfolios yesterday and returned home to the East Coast, now facing criminal charges after a car crash on Sunday night. It leaves Labour now scrambling to pick up the pieces as the election fast approaches. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
As shock turns to sadness, Labour's caucus is reflecting today, second-guessing the support they gave Kitty Allen during a difficult time.
She's a strong-willed person and she was wanting just to keep going.
I think all of us have been concerned for Kitty for some time.
She rang me on the Sunday, She rang me a few hours before it all went wrong, so she wasn't good, but if I had been in Wellington, it might not have happened.
Willie Jackson is a friend of Kitty Allen's, a cabinet minister and co-chair of the party's Maori caucus. He says the East Coast MP was given huge assistance surrounding her mental health. He's not sure much more could have been done.
She's a free spirit, she's passionate, she's a beautiful person, Kitty, but she's sick and she needs that support. She needs to get out of here and get away from politics.
In a post on Instagram today, Kitty Allen has done just that, announcing she will not stand at the coming election. She writes, "For now it is time to step out of the arena, to heal myself and chart a new course." To the Prime Minister, she says, "I have undermined you and the trust you placed in me. I cannot express the remorse I feel. I am so sorry."
I regard Kitty as an exceptionally talented person who's clearly going through hell at the moment, and I think she deserves to have some time and some space. I hate to see anybody in this situation.
Mental health is a matter that stretches across the political divide. The former National leader, Todd Muller, knows all too well how that pressure can get too much.
I can only speak about what I went through, and what I went through was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. And so when I see Kiri, I just get a sense of huge amount of sadness and some empathy.
But that empathy hasn't tempered the opposition's scrutiny. While both National and ACT have steered clear of directly criticising Kitty Allen, They've used the incident to attack Chris Hipkins' judgment and broader management of his cabinet.
What we all see is a government that has been overcome with chaos, confusion and incompetence.
We now have a government that has no more gas left in the tank.
They've also taken aim at a fracture in cabinet, with David Parker yesterday renouncing his responsibilities as Revenue Minister, effectively in protest over the Prime Minister's decision to rule out a wealth tax or CGT.
I just thought it was untenable to continue.
National says the government is beset by splits and divisions.
Just another daily soap opera, isn't it, really? I mean, it's a cabinet in chaos, clearly.
David asked to no longer be Minister of Revenue. I've respected that, and he's no longer the Minister of Revenue.
Chris Hipkins now faces an almighty task to refocus his party with the election fast approaching. That includes picking a new candidate for the East Coast and then embarking on a campaign to keep the government benches.
No campaign wants this 81 days out from an election.
I reckon we're going to win. It won't be by much, but I reckon we'll do it.
We're focused on getting the job done, and I'm looking forward to getting that underway. Game on.
Amidst Kitty Allen's Instagram post, there is one other telling line. She writes, "I pray my actions do not impact the political landscape."
And that was Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch. The football Ferns are about to hit the field against the Philippines for their second World Cup match. The excitement's been building in the capital ahead of the kick-off at 5:30. A sold-out 33,000-strong crowd is anticipating some more football Ferns World Cup magic. Our sports reporter Barry Guy joins us now from outside the stadium. Barry, how's the vibe in Wellington?
Well, it's been outstanding for a couple of days, actually, Lisa. But the vibe just here 10 minutes ago wasn't too good, because I would say probably 20,000 of the 33,000 fans were still standing here on the concourse. And there's a queue going all the way back to the railway station of people coming through. And we must be just minutes away from kick-off, so there's going to be a good lot of people here that aren't going to see the start of the game. But they're smiling and they're supporting the football Ferns, and I think they're expecting some good things.
And Barry, those who are listening and not watching won't know that you appear to be very rugged up there. So I'm just wondering, as equally important, how's the weather looking?
It's clear. And we've had rain in the last few days, and I was fearing over the weekend that perhaps every game in Wellington was going to be hampered by the wet conditions, but it's been dry all day, good conditions for the Ferns against the Philippines. There is a forecast of some rain to come later tonight, but that's predicted about 9 or 10 o'clock, so we should get through the whole game without any rain. The field looks outstanding, and yes, it's going to be cold, but I'm sure with 33,000 fans, you're going to be all, snuggled up against everyone else and keeping warm, so shouldn't be too many problems. And I'm sure we'll be jumping up and down as well to get some exercise to celebrate the Ferns doing some good things.
Yeah, hooping and hollering warms you up pretty fast. OK, the first up win was kind of an upset. The football Ferns were the underdogs, but against the Philippines, they go in as the favourites. How do you reckon they're going to cope with that tag, favourites?
Jitka Klimkova, the coach, said that they're fully grounded after that first up win, which did surprise, I'd say, the world, actually, with that result. And I, too, am wondering how they're going to react. But the way that they played that game, the maturity that they showed in that game, there is no reason why they can't carry on and do that again. The Philippines lost to Switzerland in their first game, so they're going to be really fired up for this. And it's a matter of, there are a lot of cool heads in the football Ferns side with some veterans of 150 caps and that sort of thing. So, yeah, the crowd's going to be behind them. They say that that helps them, and in a way it calms the players as well, having the crowd supporting them so much. So I have my fingers crossed. I did have some doubts, as I say, but, I'm predicting perhaps not a 1-0 win, which would be great. Again, winning 2 matches at the World Cup would be a first also, after achieving that historic game on Thursday night as well. So, yeah, it's going to be close, but I'm going for a 1-0 win for the Ferns.
Let's hope you're right, Barry. Enjoy the night. That is Barry Guy, our sports reporter, joining us outside the stadium there in Wellington. And that game is supposed to kick off in about 8 minutes' time. 22 minutes after 5, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anei a Anna, mena pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. The search for missing Christchurch real estate agent Jan Fei Bao has been focusing on a house on Trevor Street in Hornby. Retired Detective Inspector turned private investigator Mark Guthrie told Checkpoint officers appeared to be carrying out a full forensic examination. A 52-year-old man appeared in court yesterday charged with Ms Bao's kidnapping. She's been missing for nearly a week. The Prime Minister has acknowledged Kitty Allen's difficult decision to leave her East Coast parliamentary seat at October's election. Yesterday, she resigned from all of her ministerial portfolios after crashing her car on Sunday night and being charged by police. Mr Hipkins called Ms Allen a talented person who is clearly going through hell. The High Court in Christchurch has heard that police who interviewed Lauren Dickerson after the alleged murder of her 3 children trusted that her medical clearance included a mental health test. Mrs Dickerson denies the murder of her twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and Leonie, aged 6, in September 2021. Abroad, and more than 17,000 people were reported to the British government as potential victims of modern slavery last year, the highest number since records began in 2009. And back home, and the football Ferns are minutes away from their second match of the FIFA Women's Football World Cup. They're taking on the Philippines at the Wellington Regional Stadium in front of a sold-out crowd of 33,000 people. Kick-off is at 5:30. Those are the headlines.
Kia ora rā e ho. And a warning, parts of this next story are distressing. Lauren Dickerson sobbed in the High Court hearing the recording of her police interview in which she discusses killing her 3 daughters. Mrs Dickerson is on trial in Christchurch for the murder of her 2-year-old twins, Carla and Maya, and 6-year-old Leonie in Timaru in 2021. Lauren Dickerson denies the charges, arguing insanity and infanticide. Neva Chittick has been in court.
Lauren Dickerson told police something just snapped the night the girls died, shortly after her husband Graham went out for dinner with work colleagues. She sobbed in the videoed interview as she talked about wanting to relieve the pressure. Her statements made to police have been revoiced.
They started playing their hijinks again, and that's when I just couldn't anymore. I was so tired, I was screaming, I was saying no.
Mrs Dickerson said she hadn't felt normal since the riots that had erupted in South Africa 2 months earlier. She told police an email from Immigration New Zealand the day before added more stress to a process that had already stretched for more than a year and a half.
We got our visas, we did all our medicals and stuff, and yesterday we got letters back from the immigration officer saying no, they need more medical information. And I don't even know where to start with that. It was all so overwhelming.
Mrs Dickerson was also struggling to manage her depression, stints in managed isolation and parenting her 3 children.
Leonie came along and then the twins were born 4 years later, and they really put a lot of strain on us, just 2 busybodies the whole time, 24 hours a day, probably functioning on 2 hours of sleep per day.
Her face crumpled in the video as she stated what she'd done was irreversible. In court today, Lauren Dickerson covered her face and cried. Defence lawyer Kieran Beaton pressed police on checks they'd taken before the interview.
What steps did the police as an organisation take to make sure that she was actually in a fit state to be able to participate in an interview?
Police say they spoke with hospital staff who advised Lauren Dickerson had been medically cleared and was in a fit state to leave. Ms Beaton asked what further clarity was sought.
A person being medically cleared, so discharged from hospital for not needing medical treatment, isn't the same as being in a proper psychological state to be able to participate fully in an interview by a police officer about killing children.
Police witnesses say officers trusted hospital staff had done a psychological or mental health test prior to discharging Lauren Dickerson. Kieran Beaton says a formal psychiatric evaluation was done while Mrs Dickerson was in police cells the following morning.
That psychiatrist's records include the following, quote, initial impression on brief assessment, depression severe with possible psychosis, query concurrent PTSD trauma. However, will need further longitudinal assessment to verify or otherwise as in acute shock.
The defence is expected to make their opening arguments tomorrow morning.
And it is 27 minutes after 5. Time now to go back to Wellington, where the football ferns are about to hit the field against the Philippines for their second World Cup match. It's a sold-out crowd and excitement has been building in the capital. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and cameraman Samuel Rillstone hit the streets to check out the mood in town.
Let's go Philippines!
They may be outnumbered by home fans, but those cheering on the Philippines are making their presence felt. Ahead of the game, they put on a show.
We're going to bring in the festivity and the joyfulness of the Filipinos into the stadium.
That's Billy Karani-Sil, a Filipino who lives in Wellington.
We're talking about including the ones arriving from the Philippines, nearly 1,000 people. Yeah, for sure. It's going to be there. We will be shouting Laban Filipinas, which is like go for it Philippines.
Just this morning, she'd met Luke Trasporto, who's travelled from the Philippines to follow the World Cup.
For a country that's not much into football to qualify for the World Cup for the first time, even making small steps forward. For some, it may be just like, oh, we're just going to make a debut. But in reality, it's like a long story of sacrifices, of hard work, and just pure passion to like continue on playing the sport that you love, regardless if there's support or not. So we're here now with that story, and it will definitely inspire the next generations of Filipinas, Filipino football players, men and women.
New Zealand couldn't have started the tournament better than the win over Norway, but the Philippines lost their opening match to Switzerland.
Yeah, we are confident, but it's going to be pretty close. First of all, congratulations to New Zealand for winning that first ever World Cup match. So huge achievement for the country. So happy for that. But tonight I'm going to support the Philippines all out, but all the best to both teams.
Lester Castillo, another Filipino living in New Zealand, has similar thoughts.
Even though I live in New Zealand, I was rooting for New Zealand last time, but this time around I'm rooting for the Philippines.
So overall, you want New Zealand to do well, but just not tonight?
Not tonight, please.
Locals like Tracy Gardner are basking in the glow of co-hosting the Cup.
The exposure to New Zealand as a whole, and also that it shines light on women's sport. And it's just a fantastic opportunity. I don't think New Zealanders realised how big this was.
She's not going tonight, but has tickets to the pivotal New Zealand clash with Switzerland on Sunday.
I think it's really great to see New Zealanders getting behind it, sell out games, and it's fantastic.
Anand will be travelling on the Inter-Islander ferry during the match, but says he still plans to watch.
Do you follow football?
Not very closely, but because the football fans are playing tonight, that's why I was very keen, and I know it's a sellout crowd, so I was looking forward to it. But I'm certainly going to be watching it on the telly on the ferry, perhaps, or maybe later.
Chris Gall and her son Lockie are off to the stadium tonight to celebrate his 13th birthday. Lockie, a goalkeeper or forward when he plays, earlier managed to sneak some match practice in.
It's a good place to come to, and from Nelson it's the easiest and quickest place to come to, so I think there'll be a good crowd tonight.
The O'Connor family comes from Spokane, Washington, but is firmly behind the Philippines.
So who do you support for that?
The Philippines.
We have a family friend who plays for the Philippines.
Oh, who's that?
That is
Carly Phillips.
Number 15. So we're traveling around following the Philippines team and a little American.
We'll see the Dutch-US game too.
April Hundle from Austin, Texas, says she was a bit worried that the US didn't steamroll Vietnam in their first game, but she's confident they'll pull through.
It's getting bigger and bigger every year. I think it's grown tremendously since the last World Cup, and the ladies are pushing equality, and we're all jumping behind it.
Just like the people of Wellington ahead of today's match.
Jimmy Allingham reporting there, and if you were listening to that on radio, the video version of that story will be on our webpage. Do check it out. 28 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Anand Zaki. Anand, credit demand has risen for the first time in 2 years.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, people are signing up for credit cards and personal loans, and that seems to be pushing things along. So we have this quarterly report from the financial services company Equifax, and they say credit applications rose 5.3% in the June quarter, and it's the first rise since the same quarter all the way back in 2021, and it's up just over 15% from the same time last year as well. And like I mentioned earlier, credit cards and personal loans are the biggest drivers. Now, it has been suggested before that some of the credit demand can be put down to households feeling the pinch from rising living costs. But we spoke to Equifax earlier today, and they told us that it's not the case from what they are seeing, an increased credit demand. They say a lot of credit card demand is because of the return in international tourists. And personal loans, on the other hand, they're often used for big ticket items like cars. And Equifax say, the changes to the Clean Car Discount Scheme from this month actually played a role. So people were trying to get in before the rebate scaled back. Now, mortgage demand remains pretty subdued, but things are stabilising. And Equifax say that's suggesting that there's more activity in the housing market. And it does also back up recent property market reports that have been suggesting that things are picking up again.
And Anand, residential building costs keep climbing, but by all accounts, there's a good side to this coin.
Look, I'm here to bring you some good news today, Lisa. And the good news is that the pace of cost increases for building a house is slowing down. Things have been crazy over the past few years. So quotable values say the average cost of building a typical 3-bedroom house in the country's main centres rose 9.5% in the year ended June. That's compared to nearly 21% increase at the same time last year. So look, it's more than halved. But when you look at historic levels, over a 9% increase in the past year is still very high. But like I said, there is some good news. And if we narrow things down to just the first half of this year, building costs increased by less than 4%. Now, QV say it looks like things are starting to level out and the worst of the building inflation is behind us. Demand for materials and labour is easing, but there is still some uncertainty ahead. Headline inflation is still high, interest rates are still high, and there's geopolitical factors to consider, and the rebuild from Cyclone Gabrielle is still yet to fully pick up. So those are some factors that might still affect residential construction costs, but some good news there, unlike certain someone who likes to bring you facts that are disguised maybe as good news, or bad news rather.
He shall remain nameless. Shall we take a twirl around the markets, please?
Yes, the local share market gave up yesterday's gains, down 84 points or 0.7% to 11,934. Shares in trade software company TradeWindow rose after it announced a UK-based tech company has invested more than $11 million into the company and taken a near 20% stake. And finally, the Kiwi dollar is at 62.1 US cents and 91.8 Australian.
Thank you, Anand. That's Anand Zaki with Business News. A fire at a 48-home Kaianga Ora development in Auckland's East Tamaki is being treated as suspicious and is under investigation by police. The fire broke out in one block of the development early yesterday morning and quickly engulfed the building. Neighbours say there'd been some tension surrounding the development since it was announced early this year. Tom Taylor reports.
At 5 o'clock yesterday morning, Huntington Park resident Hannah woke to the sound of glass smashing onto gravel.
By the time before we even got up, it was already like in flames. It was orange. The heat was so intense and it just ripped through it. And yeah, it was just so fast.
Her mum, Sue, says she rang 111, but by then, the flames engulfing the development were already up to the 3rd story.
The heat was intense, like our windows was hot, really hot. We had a neighbour down the road running up, just checking everyone was okay, get everyone out and yelling at the gates of everyone's houses to try and get everyone out.
Hannah says she was afraid the fire would spread to neighbouring houses or even across the road where they are.
Like the embers were coming through onto our property and it just makes you realise how powerful fire is and how dangerous it is. So it was, scary.
A 6-unit block of the development has gone up in flames, just as it was about to be jibbed. The other 8 blocks appear to be unscathed. Developers Jim Scott declined to comment other than to express their gratitude to the first responders and say they're thankful no one was hurt. A construction worker on site today says they're still waiting for answers, while workers begin to rip what's left of the building apart and see what can be salvaged. And as the ashes from the housing blocks settle in neighbours' gardens, questions begin to arise. Police have now confirmed they're treating the fire as suspicious. The community of Huntington Park had held some heated meetings about the construction, which the developers were set to sell to Kaingaora upon its completion in mid-2024. One neighbour showed me a community newsletter calling on residents to donate anything from $10 to $10,000 to an action group opposing development. Sue says it's safe to say there was some angst in the neighbourhood.
This went ahead without any consultation to the neighbours. No one knew what was happening here, and it wasn't until we got the first letter from Kaingaroa saying that this development was going ahead. But they had already demolished the house and excavated and that.
In March, Kaingaora wrote to residents letting them know that the Guys Road development would be turned into public housing units, with 48 new homes going in. But residents say the project was already well underway by then. One neighbour, who asked not to be named, says she has nothing against development in general, but the scale of this project worried her.
Because, build a very high density building there, just in case everyone move in and fire again. I can't imagine what will be happen because the road too narrow and the fire truck maybe cannot come in because the car parked on the side of the road.
Another neighbour, Santiago, says although the construction has caused his family a lot of disturbance and loss of privacy, they've never disputed it themselves. He says the circumstances of the fire were dubious.
It was 5 a.m, the night was raining, so it was everything wet and it needs to be a place that it was really, really dry to start the fire.
But he doesn't want to believe that someone could have started it on purpose.
If it was somebody trying to do justice for his own hand, it was really dangerous. If the fire was bigger, more people could be injured or it could be people who die.
Kaingaora says once Fire and Emergency has concluded its investigations, the agency will work with developer Jim Scott to understand the impacts the fire will have on the completion date of the project. Police say an initial scene examination has been conducted, but investigations are ongoing. They're requesting anyone with information to come forward.
And that was Tom Taylor reporting. It is 20 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we're interested in your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme tonight. The text is 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And there's always the email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Anea Anna, mena pitipiti kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. The High Court in Christchurch has heard a recording of Lauren Dickinson's police interview in which she says something just snapped on the night her 3 daughters died. Mrs. Dickinson denies the murder of her 2-year-old twins Carla and Maya and 6-year-old Leonie in Timaru in 2021. Her defence is arguing insanity and infanticide. Police searching for missing Christchurch real estate agent Yan Fei Bao have spent the day focusing on a house in Hornby. Police have also been searching farmland near Lake Ellesmere, although they won't confirm what they're looking for or if there is a connection with the case. A 52-year-old man has been charged with Mrs. Bao's kidnapping. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has acknowledged the difficult decision Kiri Allen has made to step down at the October election, calling her a talented person person who is clearly going through hell. Ms. Allen resigned yesterday from all her ministerial portfolios after crashing her car on Sunday night and being charged by police. The Premier of the Australian state of Victoria says negotiations to walk away from hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games could take longer than expected. Last week, Daniel Andrews cited financial constraints as the reason for no longer hosting the Games. And a prolonged heatwave in the US has led to a rise in people suffering severe burns from touching hot surfaces or objects. The city of Phoenix has now seen a record-breaking 24 consecutive days of temperatures above 43 degrees Celsius. Wow. Now we have a message from for Auckland ferry commuters to check the AT website, as there have been a few sailings cancelled this evening around the 7 or 8 o'clock sailings and replaced with taxis. So check out the AT website. Lisa.
Thank you, Anna. One side of the road has closed because of a big sinkhole in an Auckland city street. The road on College Hill began to cave in yesterday and has grown today to about 3.5 metres long and nearly 2 metres deep. Auckland Council says it's been caused by a stormwater pipe that was due for renewal next month. Meanwhile, businesses in the area are accounting the costs. Anei te kai repoata, Delphine Herbert.
The hole is in the middle of the road on College Hill, which runs from Victoria Park to Ponsonby. It's about 3.5 metres long and growing. College Hill is now littered with road cones as traffic gets turned away or passes carefully alongside it. Business owners in the area say they were in disbelief as a massive sinkhole appeared in a matter of hours. Cody Creek Cafe owner Andy Smith was there to witness it open up.
Amazingly, I was here yesterday and I was walking by and I noticed that all the tarmac had sunken in. And I thought, that's strange. And then half an hour later when I'm walking back, a big chunk of it had fallen away. 2 hours later, the whole thing had gone.
He says there have been fewer customers in the cafe today as a result of the road being blocked off.
We've only been open since last week, but yeah, there was more foot traffic last week, and obviously now there's no cars going by.
Cafe 28 owner Himanshu says the loss today has been significant.
Because I didn't see any customers, because I'm totally lost, 80% loss of the business.
80% today?
80%, yeah, today, yes.
Wow. He says as well as foot traffic, food deliveries have been cancelled.
It's very hard, all the deliveries comes, they cancel all the deliveries. Wow. Just because of that one, nobody coming here to pick up the deliveries, and that's cancelled as well.
Cafe 28 staff member Gaurav Junja is worried about the possibility of the sinkhole getting worse.
These kind of things happen, so it's not big of a deal unless they completely shut off this College Hill Road and everyone will be driving around the area, so there will be not much traffic in the cafe, so that is something that I'm worried about.
Both cafe owners say they've not been notified by the council on what the next steps are or how long the road will be closed for. Resident Heather was shocked when she saw the news.
I just work up the road and we cross over here every day, so seeing it on the news last night I was like, can I get to work? I don't know.
She says she'd get worried if it got worse.
They'd probably need to do a road reconstruction or something around here, Make sure the road's stable enough for all the traffic going up and down.
Heather says she has never seen a sinkhole as big before in Auckland. The site remains cordoned off. Eastbound lanes towards the CBD are closed, while one lane is open westbound towards Ponsonby. Auckland Council is recommending motorists use Franklin Road to avoid delays on College Hill.
Well, joining us now is Auckland Council's Head of Healthy Waters, Andrew Chin. Hi, Andrew. Can you give us the latest? How big is this monster pothole now?
Oh, it's quite big. At least 2-3 metres diameter at the top, and it goes down to where the stormwater pipe has collapsed below it. A few metres, yeah.
So to put that in perspective, big enough to swallow up a mini or something a bit bigger, like a 4x4?
Not quite a 4x4 at this stage, but it is a very large hole, and obviously we want to get it fixed as soon as we can.
What do you reckon's going on under the ground there?
What's happened is there's a very old pipe that was built nearly over 100 years ago. We were aware that it was in bad condition, and we'd actually already planned to be replacing it just a couple of weeks from now. The contract was let and they were about to start on site, in the 7th of August. Unfortunately, the heavy rain and the sodden ground conditions that we've got, Mother Nature pulled the program forward. So we would have liked to have had traffic management in place which would allow all the businesses and deliveries to keep operating. But unfortunately, the hole opened up before we could get it all in place.
So just to be a bit more specific, is the pipe burst underneath the bitumen and is that leaking water undermining the situation?
This is a stormwater pipe.
Right.
It's normally empty, so it's not a water main. So what's happened is it's an old pipe, it's cracked, and all the groundwater has started to seep into the cracks, and it's taken the material, the fill around the pipe, into the stormwater pipe and washing it down with the rainfall. So what's happened is that hole has gradually got bigger and bigger as more material has washed through. And of course, once the seal is compromised on the road, more water gets in and it accelerates the process.
So do you reckon this started happening unnoticed at the earlier extreme weather events, so Auckland Anniversary weekend onwards?
So it absolutely was noticed, and we surveyed it prior to actually we had a survey and we knew it was in bad condition, and we had started the plans, but then when Cyclone Gabrielle and the Anniversary Day floods hit, we saw it was getting bad, so we accelerated the project. So it was actually all designed, the tenders were all complete, the contractor was all stood up, and like I say, the contractor was about to take possession of site and begin. They were actually working through the traffic management details with Auckland Transport. Right,
so you couldn't push it. You couldn't push it forward any faster, given that you had a suspicion that the road was being undermined, because now it's one hell of a hole, isn't it?
And it's not just the place where that pipe is broken. The pipe runs right down the middle of the road, and it's quite long. So the project is actually to replace the entire length going up the road, because you don't want to just go in and fix one small section. And then have upstream and downstream still in bad condition.
Yeah, understand, Andrew. So in relation to that sinkhole, how far up the road and down the road are you going to have to patch up?
Oh, we're actually not going to patch up. We're actually going to replace it with a much larger pipe, and there's going to be a sort of a general improvement and upgrade, and it's going to go from College Hill between England Street and Victoria West. Right,
and how long will that take to do?
We've scheduled probably the next 4 months to do it, and so we know it's a disruptive project, and that's why we're sort of taking a bit of time to try and work out the traffic management, because there's so many businesses and of course the police station as well that need to keep operating.
So Andrew, do you anticipate that entire stretch of road that you've just identified will be completely closed during 4 months of repairs? No. So the pipe is in the middle of the road, so obviously we'll try and keep lanes open. So this is actually what the contractor was working through with Auckland Transport to try and figure out what's the most safe and efficient way to keep as much of the road open as possible. But obviously we have to keep quite a broad section where the pipe is being relayed. Yeah, sure. Do you anticipate that you're going to have lanes open in each direction?
I can't say. I do. That's what we're going for. But obviously we have to reassess now with the Tomo, but absolutely we'll try our level best to keep both lanes open, but it does very much depend on the specifics of the contractor's methodology.
Right, because potentially you're talking about a hot mess for the businesses around there, aren't you? If you can't have a lane each way, it really kneecaps them.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and which is part of the reason it was really unfortunate that the rain in the weekend sort of scuppered our plans to do this in a planned and systematic way. Now we're in reaction mode.
So if you were planning to commence this around the 7th of August, right, is that still the start date? Still a start date?
No, it's coming forward now, of course. So
what day will you start on, Andrew?
So the contractor's probably going to get there, I believe, on the 31st July. So it's pretty soon, but they're going to do some temporary fixes to make the hole safe. They're also doing some ground penetrating radar up and down that old pipe length to see if any other cavities have opened up that we can't see under the bitumen.
Because the concern is potentially that there's a whole lot more trouble in different spots, either up and down that road or in other parts of Auckland.
Well, for this particular pipeline, we have the project. We are replacing the whole lot with a larger. It's a comprehensive solution that's planned to be delivered. Like I say, the weather got us by 2 weeks.
Really appreciate you explaining that. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Andrew Chin, who's the head of Healthy Waters at Auckland Council and the man in charge of patching up that ginormous sinkhole. It is 8 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's a race against time once Maori and Pasifika women in New Zealand are diagnosed with breast cancer. A report released last year revealed Maori women are 33% more likely to die within 10 years of diagnosis. And for Pasifika women, the odds are even higher at 52%. RNZ Pacific's Susana Suisuika and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Waking up to see another day is a gift for Ngāti Whakaue, Tūhaurangi and Kuki Airani mum of 3, Maria Marama. But it was 8 years ago that she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Before then, she'd been fit and healthy. Her diagnosis came as a shock.
Immediately I thought, I'm going to die, and then I was angry because I'd done the right things. So I was really confused about why I'd come out with this, pretty terrible outcome, and then my doctor said that he'd refer me to the breast clinic because I had private medical insurance, and that started my journey. But I was pretty gutted, and then I also thought about I'm not going to be here for my kids, who at that stage I had a child that was just starting intermediate, and then I had 2 older ones. And I thought I'm not going to be around for my youngest daughter. And then I thought I'm not even going to be here for my mokopuna. So at the age of 49, that was what was, going through my head. So it was pretty devastating.
What followed was a long journey that saw Maria undergo chemotherapy, radiation, Herceptin treatment, and reconstruction surgery. Having gone through the private health system for most of her treatment, Maria says her experience with the public health system was unpleasant.
I think for Maori and Pacific, we kind of herded through a pathway that's quick, dirty and nasty, if I can put it that way, because the system is, it's busy. There are a lot of us. But Maori and Pacific have to make their way into the system first. So I think there's some access issues around mammogram and screening, and how Maori women and Pacific women are educated around the need to have those done.
Last year, the Breast Cancer Foundation published its first and biggest study of its national register. 30,000 patients were covered in the report, with damning results for Maori and Pasifika women. Maori wahine are 33% likely to die within 10 years of being diagnosed, and Pasifika 52%. While overall survival rates have improved, Maori and Pasifika women still have higher breast cancer mortality, lower breast screening rates, and are underrepresented in clinical trials research when compared to the wider population. Dr. Olivia Pierellini, who is one of the few Pasifika oncologists in New Zealand, says improving the stats requires the public health system to be an accurate reflection of the community it serves.
My first thought is representation matters. Who's on the clinical trial leads, who's on the governance committees to make sure that the trials are actually going to benefit Māori and Pasifika, the trials are inviting to that. Chairman of the Pasifika GP Network, Dr. Api Talemaitonga, says while he has faith in the public health system, it needs to be culturally safe.
In my experience as a GP, when people understand what it is about, when you speak to them in their language, when you have a support person that can translate it for them, they will come. Because to have a mammogram, to participate in clinical trials, they will understand how important it is for them, not just for their health, but for their family and the role that they play in that.
Tomorrow, Maria will be on a panel sharing her story at a breast cancer trials Q&A event held at the Auckland Museum.
So I'd like to see, as an outcome to this, more Māori and Pacific researchers researching breast cancer on our behalf, so that there is a culturally responsive system that is informed by research that's done by Maori and Pasifika.
When asked how she views life now having survived breast cancer, she says she's never going to give up.
No one's going to tell me that you've only got 5 years to live. I'm going to make sure that and do everything that I can to ensure my longevity so that I am here for my mokopuna. So it is about attitude, it is about your perspective on life, and that life is worth living.
And don't forget, you can check out the video version of that story on the web. And the Philippines have just scored in the 23rd minutes against the football ferns in Wellington. Assume the brace position. With water quality in rivers becoming a major issue around the world, in France they're celebrating the regeneration of the Seine in Paris. It's now suitable for swimming for the first time in 80 years. The transformation comes ahead of next year's Olympic Games in the French capital, which will see swimming and diving events take place in the actual river. Here's the BBC's Hugh Schofield from Paris.
Here's a foretaste of what's to come. Earlier this summer, they staged a diving competition in the Seine, right by the Eiffel Tower. World-renowned divers leaping from the high board and into the no longer murky waters below.
It's beautiful water, soft and hot. For us, it's the best.
Until very recently, such a scene would have been unthinkable and illegal. The waters of the beloved River Seine were just too dirty. Exactly 100 years ago, swimming in the river was banned. An annual Christmas race continued for a while, but after the Second World War, that too came to an end. The problem, of course, was pollution, industrial and human. But now, when officials from City Hall take their weekly samples, the news is only good. In the last 10 or 20 years, bacteria levels have fallen dramatically. To get to this point has required time, commitment and a lot of money.
If you want to get an idea of the sheer scale of the effort that the French are putting into cleaning up the River Seine, then you have to come here, the most impressive building site you're ever likely to see. Just behind Austerlitz station, it's like a massive underground cathedral, really, a round cathedral with pillars of concrete 30 metres deep.
The big recurrent problem was the runoff after heavy rain. Because stormwater ends up in Paris sewers and risks backing up into people's toilets, the cities had to use the River Seine as a safety outlet. Too much rain and some human waste ended up in the river. But with this new reservoir, that ends. The vast underground cylinder will store the excess water till levels subside. It all means that swimming will soon be returning to the river, not just in events at next year's Olympics, but beyond that for the general public.
Alrighty, after the news at 6, we will return to Wellington and that football game between the Philippines and the football ferns. Somewhat nervously, Philippines has scored in the 23rd minute against the football ferns. People here are now watching it through hands over eyes.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The woman who killed her 3 daughters sobbed in the High Court today and covered her face as her recorded police interview played. Lauren Dickerson is on trial in Christchurch for the murder of twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and Leonie, aged 6, in September 2021. She denies the charges, arguing insanity and infanticide. Ms Dickerson told police something just snapped the night the girls died, shortly after her husband Graham went out for dinner with work colleagues. She cried in the video interview as she talked about wanting to relieve the pressure. Mrs Dickerson said she hadn't felt normal since riots had erupted in South Africa 2 months earlier. Police have been searching near Lake Ellesmere, south of Christchurch, as the hunt for a missing real estate agent intensifies. Jan Fei Bao vanished last Wednesday while door-knocking in nearby Wigram. Forensic police have spent the day focusing on a house in Trevor Street in Hornby. Police have also been seen searching farmland near Lake Ellesmere, although they won't confirm what they're looking for if there is a connection with the case. A 52-year-old man appeared in court yesterday charged with Ms Bao's kidnapping. Outgoing Labour MP Stuart Nash says the cyclone-battered East Coast is still well represented at Parliament. 3 ministers from the area have resigned or been sacked this year, Mr Nash, Mika Whaitiri and now Kitty Allen. But Mr Nash, who remains MP for Napier until the election, says local representation in the flood-affected region is strong.
Both Anna Lorca and I are still working really hard on the ground with the locals. Kieran McAnulty represents the Hawke's Bay Recovery, and we're still well connected into Grant and the other ministers on the Cyclone Recovery Cabinet Committee. So whilst there's not the high-profile ministers on the ground doing the work, the local MPs are still doing the work and Hawke's Bay is still being heard.
The Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson has taken over Kitty Allen's regional role. Auckland's Mayor wants better lines of communication from Council during civil defence emergencies. This afternoon, the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Committee approved a plan on how better to respond in natural disasters for public consultation. The city saw widespread damage as well as loss of life during heavy floods and Cyclone Gabrielle earlier this year. Mayor Wayne Brown, who was criticised for his communication with the public during the flooding, says he wants further scrutiny of the communication channels and hopes to see an improvement. Mr Brown says no one had told him what was going on and he wants clear guidance on what his role is in an emergency. An Auckland homeowner says the scope of works from her insurer to repair her flood-damaged house underestimates what's needed. Jen, who is among 1,000 homeowners who have asked the government's Claims Resolution Service for help, moved out of her Mount Roskill house in January, the day it flooded throughout, and says it is a total repair. While fully covered, she says her insurer's offer has left out underfloor insulation and much of the electrical work. Jen is disputing the $200,000 offer to ensure all the costs are included.
It's stressful. I want to go home, but I don't want to rush through anything and end up causing more problems in the future. And I want to, take the time now to consider everything and make sure that everything is all sorted and clear.
Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei will hold a karakia and blessing on Thursday morning at the site of the fatal shooting in Auckland CBD. Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Deputy Chair Ngārimu Blair says the karakia will be clear and reset the space for normal use. He says that iwi are humbled to be able to provide spiritual and cultural support to those who have been affected by the shooting.
It's just a part of that ongoing work and obligation and honour, actually, that we have to do this kind of mahi to help those who feel they need it to continue to live, work and play in the CBD.
Ngārimu Blair says that iwi has also called for a moment's silence to be observed across the country at 7 o'clock on Thursday morning. A study by leading climate scientists has found the recent powerful heat waves in Europe and the US would have been virtually impossible without global warming caused by humans. They warn future heat waves will be even more extreme if greenhouse gas emissions are not cut rapidly. Here's the BBC's Georgina Ranard.
The scientists behind this study, the World Weather Attribution Group, say they are not surprised by the results, concluding that the impact of climate change has caused the extreme peaks in heat seen around the world this month. Humans have been pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere for decades by burning fossil fuels. But this study warns that if warming continues at the current pace, intense heat waves will occur every 2 to 5 years.
Meanwhile, a prolonged heat wave in the US has led to an uptick in severely burned patients who were injured after touching hot surfaces or objects. The city of Phoenix has now seen a record-breaking 24 consecutive days of temperatures above 43 degrees Celsius. Arizona Burn Centre's Dr. Kevin Foster told the BBC that all of the centre's 45 hospital beds are currently occupied. He says around 1/3 of those patients have suffered severe contact burns from scorching concrete and asphalt surfaces. In sport, and the action has kicked off in the Football Ferns FIFA World Cup game against the Philippines in front of a sold-out crowd in Wellington. The Philippines took a 1-0 lead in the 23rd minute. And that's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, host of Mata,
Tonight we'll discuss the Green Party's Hoki Whenua Mai Maori land policy with List MP Te Anau Tuiono. Then I'm joined by panellists Professor Ella Henry and Shane Tepo. Nō reira, are taringa mai kia mata after the 6:30 headlines this evening on RNZ National or at rnz.co.nz/mata.
Now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Taumaranui and Taupo. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery from this evening, easing tomorrow. Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine with the odd shower about Bay of Plenty. Showers developing about Hawke's Bay and Gisborne tomorrow, possibly heavy. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa and Marlborough showers, possibly heavy and thundery from this evening with snow to 700 metres. Gradually clearing tomorrow. Nelson and Canterbury, generally fine. A few showers about Canterbury, some heavy, clearing tomorrow. Bulla to Fiordland, also Otago and Southland. Showers, heavy and possibly thundery at times with snow to 400 metres in the south, clearing tomorrow morning. However, rain returning to Fiordland tomorrow afternoon with scattered rain elsewhere late evening. And for the Chatham Islands, rain at times. RNZ National, it is 6:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Ngā mihi ana, no mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The football Ferns are down 1-0 against the Philippines in Wellington tonight. It's the New Zealand side's second match of the tournament and they're playing in front of another capacity crowd. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham joins us now from the capital. One word, Jimmy, yikes.
Yes, Lisa, I hoped I could be the bearer of some good news with a first-half equaliser, but it's not the case yet with now less than 10 minutes to go. The football Ferns are still 1-0 down. I'm at the Bond Sports Bar in central Wellington, and it's fair to say that goal drew a few gasps from the people here. It wasn't what they wanted to see, but there's still a lot of time to go in the match.
Yeah, how many people are there?
There's about 100 people in this bar. It's absolutely packed. The stadium itself is a sellout. 33,000 people are in Wellington Regional Stadium tonight. There's hardly a yellow seat on the TV visible, hardly a spare seat in sight. The town's been full today. There's a great atmosphere in Wellington, and there's a great atmosphere in this bar too.
Bit of yelling in the background. I'm really hoping there's going to be an equaliser while you're talking to us. I mean, what kind of buzz is there been in town? And are people's nerves holding up right now? Because I'm not sure mine are, Jimmy.
No, I'm not sure they are, but the buzz in town has been really good. Walking around today, you hear accents from all around the world. There's American accents. There were lots of Filipino people here. There was a parade of several dozen of them leading into the match. We met quite a few supporters of the Philippines team today, and they're so passionate about their team. It's their first time in the World Cup. New Zealanders are pretty proud too to be hosting this event and very proud of what the football Ferns achieved last Thursday with their first up win. But on the streets as a whole, it's sort of like the 2011 Rugby World Cup, the 2015 Cricket World Cup, a really good vibe around, and you get to see the teams even. I was just walking through town today and saw the South African team board their bus, which it's a pretty cool feeling to know that you're part of something like that.
Thanks for the update, Jimmy. That's Jimmy Ellingham joining us now from the capital. If there's any excitement, we'll bring you the news. 9 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Greece's Prime Minister says his country is at war against wildfires. More than 80 fires are burning. Tens of thousands of people have been evacuated from the islands of Rhodes and Corfu. There are fears strong winds and high temperatures could worsen the fires. The European Union has sent firefighters and reinforcements to help battle the blazes. Here's the BBC's Jenny Hill.
It seems like a miracle no one was hurt. Fire swept through this resort, not much left behind.
So much of this island still looks, well, idyllic. And then you take a few steps and you come across a scene, well, like this. It's still smouldering. That, of course, was someone's livelihood completely destroyed. This is where there were sunbeds just a few days ago.
It wasn't just tourists who scrambled to safety.
I was crying. It was making me feel terrible.
Adisa and her family, who all work in the hotels here, had to get out too. When we met them, they'd only just learned their house had survived the fire.
For the tourists, it was a really terrified and bad experience. But for us, I think it's worse because we live here, everything is burned.
Not everything. This hotel, one of the most luxurious in Lindos, escaped damage. But the guests are gone and much of the surrounding countryside is destroyed.
If you have seen the scenery around, it's like a biblical catastrophe. The hotel is a hotel, you will rebuild it, you will repaint it, but the nature outside is the most important thing that we need to check what we're going to do, because all this is a result of the environmental crisis that we are facing.
And all day, despite every effort, the fires have raged on. Strong winds fanning the flames. It's far too soon to properly assess the damage done here. But on the nearby beach, a business owner had come to take a look.
We lost the business. We have a good health, and we are hope to fix it again.
It's a sign of just how quickly things change. The wind's very strong now, and we've been told we need to get out because the fire may be coming towards us.
It seems unstoppable. Firefighters now battling to save more villages from the flames. All those who fled can do is watch and hope.
The US Department of Justice is suing the state of Texas over its use of a giant floating barrier in the Rio Grande River. Earlier this month, a 300-metre-long string of bright orange wrecking ball-sized buoys appeared in the river that separates Mexico and the United States. State Governor Greg Abbott argues the barrier deters migrants from crossing into the state from Mexico. However, the Department of Justice alleges Texas is violating federal law. CNN's Rosa Flores has more.
We are at the south end of our property, driving along the river.
Magali Urbina owns a pecan orchard in Eagle Pass, Texas, and says her riverfront property used to be beautiful.
My husband and I would come out fishing. In this area, it's really pretty.
But she says the state of Texas installed concertina wire blocking her access to her own property by barricading the gates with metal and piles of dirt.
Now it just looks like a war zone.
Historically, it's been a popular migrant crossing because the water levels of the Rio Grande are low. And most recently, Texas deployed a floating border barrier without obtaining permits from the federal government, says the State Department. The buoys are 4 feet in diameter and anchored to the bottom of the Rio Grande.
It surprised me that they're just in front of my property.
Her property is in the Del Rio Border Patrol sector, the busiest sector on the southern border last month, with more than 24,000 migrant crossings. After Mexico's top diplomat complained about the buoys violating 2 treaties, and more than 80 U.S. Democratic lawmakers urged President Joe Biden to take legal action against Texas.
It's barbaric treatment. It's extreme cruelty.
The Justice Department did just that.
Did they deny you water?
Al principio sí me negaron. 2 pregnant migrants who did not wish to show their faces tell CNN they were initially denied water by Texas National Guard members as they tried to turn themselves into U.S. immigration authorities.
She says that the Texas National Guard at first denied her water, and then afterwards they did give them water, but it was 1 bottle of water for 2 to 3 people.
Law enforcement in airboats circled them, knocking them over after showing them handcuffs for requesting water, the other migrant said. The Texas National Guard did not respond to CNN's request for comment. These accounts come after a Texas DPS trooper blew the whistle last week, saying Texas had been treating migrants inhumanely when troopers were ordered to push migrants back into the river and deny them water. Texas DPS now saying the trooper misunderstood orders.
If a member from one of our leadership or a supervisor tells a trooper to push back migrants, what that means is to verbally tell them, go to a port of entry.
The billions of dollars Texas is spending to stop illegal immigration, clearly not stopping the migration flow.
I have seen people die from heat stroke on the property.
Urbina worries that while the U.S. DOJ and Texas duke it out in court,
it's very frustrating.
Migrants and property owners are caught in the middle.
Israel's parliament has approved restrictions on the powers of the Supreme Court, leading to some of the largest protests in the country's history. The move prevents judges from blocking government decisions they consider unreasonable. Critics say it will destroy Israel's democracy, but the government says it will curb judicial overreach. The White House described the vote as unfortunate, pointing out the measure was passed with the slimmest possible majority. Here's the BBC's Tom Bateman in Jerusalem.
The streets of Israel were soaked in anger.
moments after one of the most contested laws in the country's history was passed. Anti-government protesters were being blasted with water cannon, and the rage towards Mr. Netanyahu, or Bibi, was boiling over.
This is my country, and Bibi kidnapped our citizen, and it's not supposed to be. We need to be here. I serve in the army. I have 3 little boys, and I want to continue to stay in my country.
And outside the Israeli parliament, a showdown. Today's vote, they said, was a red line.
These protesters had said they would stay put and block the route to the Knesset, and now they're trying to prove it. The security forces using a van. These are unprecedented scenes.
The Israeli leader has just had surgery to fit a pacemaker. He appeared amid the increasingly fraught atmosphere. The opposition shouted shame as the critical vote neared, and they walked out, claiming historic changes were being rammed through, opening a door to dictatorship.
There is no prime minister in Israel. Netanyahu has become a puppet on the strings of messianic extremists.
But tonight, Mr. Netanyahu dismissed his critics.
Today we carried out a required democratic move. The move was aimed at restoring a degree of balance between the branches of government, which we had for 50 years.
But with the protests set to intensify, the mood is one of deepening crisis. There is escalating violence in the region, the absence of any political horizon in the wider conflict, and Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now, anti-government dissent is spreading into the security establishment, and Israel's internal divisions have rarely felt this severe.
Russian military courts have so far reported more than 1,000 cases of desertion. Western observers say the number of soldiers fleeing military service, often going into hiding in neighbouring countries, is on the rise. Deutsche Welle's Mirko Fuchs met 2 of those who have fled Russia.
Here in Georgia, in the capital Tbilisi, this young Russian man is living in fear. He doesn't want to tell us his real name. We call him Nikita. Until February, Nikita lived and studied in Moscow. After being called up to join the army, he decided to flee the country.
I didn't want to go to war. Escaping was my only chance. I was aware of the consequences, that I would have to hide from Russia my whole life, and I could never come back. But I just don't want to kill people.
Thousands of kilometers away in Uralsk, western Kazakhstan, Igor Sanjiv wants to share his story too. When mobilization began last fall, he was supposed to report to the military, allegedly to compare personal data. However, when Igor presented himself to the office, he was ordered to go to an army training camp that same evening. Feeling trapped, Igor decided to flee.
I don't want to play this lottery called war that President Putin is running.
Igor Sanjiv calls the war against Ukraine a deadly lottery. According to media reports, it's said to have already cost the lives of tens of thousands of Russians. This information cannot be verified. Many mobilized by Putin's decree last year came from Russia's poorest regions. Some complain about poor conditions, lack of weapons and ammunition. The human rights activists from the Russian NGO Iditi Lesom know of more than 1,000 lawsuits for alleged desertion. In fact, the number of deserters is said to be even greater, and the fear of further mobilization is still there, especially among those committed in peacetime, like Nikita in Georgia. He says the army funded his studies and he should now work for them for 3 years following his graduation.
I signed the contract out of stupidity. I wasn't aware of many things when I started studying at the age of 20. Okay, I thought, I'll waste 3 years in the army, but I'll get my degree for it.
The financial possibilities of our population are limited. For many, mobilization and participation in hostilities is the only chance to make any money.
But now, in times of war, it's a matter of life and death. Igor and Nikita know that deserters in Russia can expect long prison sentences.
I don't feel safe in Georgia. Sometimes I have nightmares where my old boss comes knocking on the door and says, "Come on, I found you."
Igor applied for asylum in Kazakhstan, but he was rejected. He challenged the decision but failed. Now he is threatened with deportation to Russia and is under no illusions about his future.
What's waiting for me is jail or the front in Ukraine.
But Igor and Nikita want to keep resisting, to try and stay abroad as long as they can.
There's another warning about the health risks of soft drinks. Research analysing data from almost 500,000 teenagers in 100 countries links soft drink consumption to being overweight or obese. The findings have been published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. However, the findings are being rejected by the Australian beverage industry. Here's the ABC's Annie Guest.
It's thirsty work for junior rugby league players at Burpengary, north of Brisbane.
I can see a can of squash soft drink there.
How was it?
I don't remember. I drank it that fast.
How often do you have soft drink?
A lot.
How old are you?
16.
I only drink no sugar.
Low or no?
No sugar.
No sugar.
Yeah. Or water.
Greg Lewis is the vice president of the club and runs the canteen.
Today we've probably gone through about 5 cartons of Coke, probably 3 cartons of Fanta, 1 thing of water compared to all the soft drinks, so 200 to 300 cans.
So how do you feel about serving up so much soft drink to, say, kids in particular, and everyone's getting more overweight?
To be honest with you, I've never really thought about it. It's just one thing we've always stocked here, so we just make sure that we've got plenty to sell.
Researchers hope people will think about their findings on soft drink. Dr. Huan Hu led a team of 4 researchers from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health in Japan. They examined how much soft drink almost 500,000 teenagers are drinking in more than 100 countries. Iceland's teens have the least, and those in Cambodia and the South Pacific countries of Tonga and Niue drink the most soft drink.
In some countries, more than 50% of children consume soft drinks at least 1 time per day.
For every 10% increase in daily soft drink consumption, there was a corresponding rise in overweight and obesity of about 4%. Dr. Huan acknowledges fatty food and physical inactivity also play a role. He suggests sugar taxes help reduce soft drink intake. In Australia, about a quarter of kids are overweight or obese. Among teenagers, 17% of boys and 10% of girls drink a litre of sugary soft drink a week. Jeff Parker from the Australian Beverages Council rejects the study's conclusions.
Obesity is complex and it's multifactorial. What we do know in Australia is that obesity rates have been continuing to rise in both adults and children. What is interesting is that sugar from soft drinks has been decreasing for well over 2 decades now.
But you do acknowledge that soft drinks are part of the picture with obesity and overweight increasing.
High soft drink consumption can lead to people putting on weight for most people. However, they can be consumed as part of a balanced diet in moderation.
And he says there's no evidence sugar taxes help reduce overweight and obesity.
Australia's major supermarkets have started sending soft plastics overseas to be recycled. Coles and Woolworths are dealing with a massive stockpile of plastic left over from the collapse of Australia's largest soft plastic recycling program, RedCycle. Without domestic capacity, the retailers say they are left with little option but to ship the waste offshore. The ABC's Bridget Fitzgerald reports.
There's 11,000 tonnes of soft plastic being stored in warehouses across the country, and Australia simply doesn't have the capacity to recycle it all. But Jeff Angel, the director of the environment group Boomerang Alliance, warns that sending it offshore isn't a sustainable solution.
We're in a very parlous state with soft plastics collection and recycling, and the fact that it's going overseas to who knows what, incineration, possibly recycling or just landfill, is just another element of the ongoing disaster.
The major supermarkets have started sending samples of soft plastics overseas to be recycled as they begin working their way through a massive stockpile of plastic waste that's been sitting in storage since RedCycle went into liquidation. RedCycle was Australia's largest recycling scheme for soft plastics, and Coles and Woolworths took responsibility for the plastic left over after its collapse in February. But so far, the supermarkets have only been able to process about 120 tonnes. The supermarkets are looking now at options in Germany and the US where the plastic could be used in chemical recycling, which means it could be turned into food packaging or medical equipment.
We don't have scaled capacity to process soft plastics into food grade plastic onshore.
Suzanne Tumaru is the CEO of the Australian Council of Recycling. Australia generates 70 billion pieces of soft plastic waste each year, and there are programs to recycle soft plastic in Australia, but they only have limited capacity.
Those operators that are currently up and running here in Australia are working earnestly to process the material that's being collected, and they're doing a really good job of it. There's a range of outputs that come from it. For example, some would go into things like timber replacement products. You think your park benches and bollards. Some are being produced back into an oil through what we call chemical or advanced recycling.
The federal government recently committed an extra $60 million to its Recycling Modernisation Fund, aimed at processing hard-to-use plastics. Suzanne Tumaru says she expects a significant increase in Australia's capacity to recycle soft plastics in the next 18 months.
Alrighty, before we head off, the police would like your help, police. They are trying to track down a number of stolen e-bikes and scooters that were pinched from the Tauranga area in two separate burglaries of local businesses. In particular, have you seen a UBCO electric motorbike? If you know these kinds of bikes, you'll know what they mean. Khaki greens are the model they're looking for, and Go Scoot electric scooters. If you have any details, 10-5. They would really appreciate it if you notice these bikes left in an unusual place, or if someone in the neighbourhood has acquired them recently and unexpectedly. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi e popo, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up reviews the New Zealand-Philippines World Cup match and all the latest with a legendary football fan. Are we still in half-time, guys? We're still in half-time, so fingers crossed that things look up. We will see you tomorrow. Kei te hoki mai anō a popo whānau po Māori.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Lawyers for murder-accused Lauren Dickerson have questioned why she did not undergo an official psychological examination before her police interview. Mrs Dickerson is on trial in the High Court in Christchurch over the deaths of her daughters Maya, Carla and Leonie in 2021 and is seeking a verdict of insanity and infanticide. Nearly a week after her disappearance, police searching for Christchurch real estate agent Yan Fei Bao have spent the day at a house in Trevor Street in Hornby. Experts from the International Atomic Energy Agency say they have discovered mines at a Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And the site of the fatal shooting in Auckland CBD will see Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei holding a karakia and blessing on Thursday morning. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, every epic film starts with an epic story. And they don't get any bigger than the man who developed and helped deploy the world's first atomic bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer. His story is told in the Pulitzer Prize-winning book American Prometheus by Martin Sherwin and Kai Bird. And I'll speak to Kai about remembering the consequences of what we create when he joins me on Afternoons from 1 p.m. tomorrow here on RNZ National.
Hurihea tō aroaro ki te rā, tukuna tō ātārangi, kia taka ki muri I a koe, hurihea tō mata ki tēnei puna ātata o te ao hurihuri nei, tukuna o whakaro kia rere. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, brought to you by Te Māngai Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Joining me on the show is Professor Ella Henry and Shane Te Pou. But another government minister, Kiritapu Allen, has resigned her portfolios and announced she will not be standing at the next election following a Sunday night car accident where she was charged with careless driving and refusing to accompany a police officer. She also failed a blood alcohol test. We will discuss that issue and what it means for the government shortly. Engari, hei tukatuku I te wānanga ka toro atu ki te rōpū ka kāriki. The Green Party has released its Maori land policy in the run-up to the election. Hoki whenua mai aims to return stolen land and private ownership to Māori, end perpetual leases that lock Māori out of their own land and prevent the acquisition of Māori land under the Public Works Act. Hoki whenua mai will also remove the 2008 deadline on historical treaty claims implemented during Helen Clark's reign. To discuss this and how the policy will work and how committed Te Rōpū Kākāriki is to it, I'm joined via Zoom by Greens List MP, Te Ano Tuiono. Tēnā koe te tungane.
Tēnā koe o tira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Can I begin with Kiritapu Allen's resignation? She's announced she will no longer stand